Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Campus Center. My name is Peter Bonatadibus, and I welcome you to the Campus Center. And for our seminar on the LinkedIn, leveraging LinkedIn. Before we begin, I want to thank Mr. Michael Mexer, Special Assistant to Student Affairs, the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs. Mike, without you, thank you. I appreciate that. I'd like to thank the Campus Center staff for putting this together for us. I'd like to thank Audio and Visual for providing us the feed to our YouTube for later on. And special thanks to Ms. Holly Hunt. You'll meet Holly later on. She put together the panelists for today's event. As Director of Information Systems and Technology for the division, our Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Dr. Gail DiSabatino, instilled a philosophy to us about co-curricular events and seminars for student success. I heard that loud and clear, and I engaged Michael on how I could get my area, which is basically IT support in the division, how I can reach out to students. And one of them was putting this seminar together. So thanks to Gail's leadership, this seminar was possible. And I would like to introduce Dr. Gail DiSabatino to opening remarks. Thank you, Gail.
Good morning. It is still morning, right? Yes, yes, yes. And let me thank you, Peter, first and foremost, for your vision to make something happen in this arena for our students. You know, usually the director of information systems and technology in an office has kind of got their head down and they're doing their one or two very specific things, and they don't really think about the power that they have in terms of helping students make connections. And I just have to compliment you on thinking very broadly about your role within our division. So thank you for making this happen and everything you do for us in student affairs. I also want to thank our presenters and the mentors who are here today, and especially Holly Hunt from Johnson Controls. We're really excited to have you here and looking forward to you sharing insights that I think are just going to be totally powerful for our students. You know, I thought about maybe I should start with a story about my own networking. I've got lots of networking stories I'd be happy to share with you. But I think what I decided I was going to do is going to share with the students my unnetworking story. So when I was your age or in your situation, and I was around college, late high school, college, I grew up in a very small state where my family, there were immigrants in the state, and they helped build a lot of buildings in the state. So they knew a lot of people, you know, like they had just been connected because they were in the construction business. So my father was often talking about, well, you know, I'll introduce you to so-and-so so you can do this, or I'll introduce you to so-and-so so you could do that. And I'm like, no, I have to do it all on my own. And I also kind of thought back then, I thought, that's just an old boy system, and I don't want to network with those old boys. And as I got older, I thought, boy, was I a fool. I can't tell you how many opportunities I probably missed out on. It was a very simple thing. He was just wanting to open the door. I still had to walk through it and do all the work. So when you think about networking, and I've heard students say this to me on many occasions, well, you know, I don't want to just overstep my bounds here. You know, I don't want to do anything like under the table or in a roundabout kind of way. That's not what networking is. Networking is very upfront. It's helping you to get the doors open. You're still going to have to do the work. You're still going to have to be the ones to walk through the doors and show off your stuff. And I know you can do that. I know you can do that because our students have amazing capacity for networking. Just take advantage of it. So I encourage you to learn all there is about social networking using LinkedIn, but also to remember the power of the relationship and the relationships. All these people you're going to meet here today, don't lose that. And they're going to introduce you to more people, and don't lose that. The relationships, the social networking, using technology, put all those tools together, and you will come out way ahead of the game. So thank you for coming today. I'm excited to hear from our panelists, and let's get the show on the road.
Thank you, Dr. Sabatino. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Miss Holly Hunt. I met Holly about 5 years ago. It was a networking event at ASIS International in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a happenstance meet. We just happened to be in the same area, and we started talking. A few days later, I sent a friend request to LinkedIn. And from that, a collaboration began. We've collaborated over the years, and today I have asked Holly to do this for me because I know she can leverage LinkedIn better than anybody I know. So Holly's a leader in the security industries, and that's how I met her, through a security conference. She has keen insight what college students need to get that job, to get that next step up there. So it is my pleasure to bring our Master of Ceremonies on the stage, Ms. Holly Hunt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So we had expected a few more folks today than we have here in the room. And today, you know, a lot of you came out to really learn about LinkedIn, and we're going to cover the tools of that in our second part of our session as an actual workshop. So in the interest of networking, can I ask for all of those that are sitting next to someone, do you know who they are? Okay, so I'm going to ask you to get up and fill in these two tables up here, and I want you to come meet some new people. So everybody get up, come on. I'm going to give you a hard time here, but I want us to sit next to someone we may not have met, and come fill in these three front tables here so that we can all kind of leverage each other. And that's really what networking is about. In just a moment, I'm going to have my panel introduce themselves. And today's event was titled LinkedIn and Leveraging Social Media and How to Network Your Way into the Future. So to me, LinkedIn is not networking, it's a tool. And we're going to teach you how to use that tool, but before that, I want to really share the power of what it is to make a personal connection. And I'm standing here today because of that personal connection. And so with that being said, I've prepared a conference today, or a conversation with some leaders that I felt that could really contribute to that. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting at the end, Mr. Brian Allen. If you could introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and the role that you play in business today.
Sure, thank you. So I'm a former chief security officer with Time Warner Cable, former lobbyist, recovering attorney, author, adjunct professor, and currently unemployed and transitioning, and looking for options and the right place to land. So this networking conversation is right on target.
Wonderful, thank you. And Nora?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Nora Tovar. I work for Johnson Controls. I have about 15 years of corporate and agency recruiting. I have supported about 90% actually of top 500 companies, and I specialize now in early career recruitment, so for internships and recent grads.
Thank you, Nora. Nick?
Hi, good morning. My name is Nick Thurmanos. I'm a director of sales at Dell EMC. I've got about 20 years in the technology space with EMC, Dell, and spent about 11 years at Microsoft.
Good morning, everyone. Is this working?
Nope.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Federico. I think some of you may know me just from seeing me around campus, but I'm the Associate Director for Career Education in our Career Services office. And I've been in career services for about 14 years, and I'm also a proud alumna of this very university. I got my undergraduate degree here.
Thank you. And Matt?
My name is Matt Chiruka. I'm a work in business development for Vecna Robotics. We're a local robotics company. Go across multiple verticals, and I got my start working with a lot of early stage startups, and so networking was very important for what I do as well.
Wonderful. So one of the things that really drives me in business is understanding the laws of leadership. And my favorite law from Maxwell's book is law number 2, which is the power of influence. And without influence, it's really hard to move forward within your career. And how can we help you with influence? Influence is number 1 about having a seat at the table. And so when Peter said, let's set it up classroom style, I said, no, I want round tables because I want everyone in here to know what it's like to own a seat at the table and to have a voice and to have influence. So you're sitting in round tables today. When we break out, there will actually be mentors joining you for lunch to go through that because it's important that you understand what that's about. We're going to be visiting on LinkedIn later, but 3 of the subjects that as a panel we really identified that can help and support the student body here is understanding the power of networking, really diving into what mentoring means and how to look at that, and then finally, your brand ambition. So thinking about LinkedIn, I wanted to make sure that I actually could carry the conversation today. So I went and visited LinkedIn last Friday so that I could stand before you and say, okay, I know what this thing is. Peter was incredibly complimentary to me about my LinkedIn. And to be honest, I have over 10,000 connections that are industry related on LinkedIn, but I don't use the tool the way I should. And so I'm really excited that Deborah's here to actually teach me how to leverage this incredible tool that has brought me this much success. So who is LinkedIn? It's a social network website aimed at professionals and allows members to contact past and current colleagues, uncover new business opportunities, and network with experts within a field. They say their vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce and that their mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. So sitting here today, why do you think LinkedIn is important to you? Well, first of all, 97% of all HR and staffing professionals use LinkedIn. So if we're just in a hedging your bets kind of thing, you need to get involved and use LinkedIn based on that. And then also, more than 10 million active job posts are on LinkedIn currently, and more than 9 million companies' data and information. Once you have that job, you can leverage about your customer you're researching or what you're looking at. So when we get in LinkedIn today, it's our goal that it'll be an active workshop that you will leave here today with the foundation and start of that profile that we're looking at. So I pulled up all of our profiles so we can look at all the areas of which mine is wrong or others, and Deborah will walk us through that. So you'll go through and you'll kind of see some of our slides here, but this is my LinkedIn here. And one of the things I wanted to bring up today was really about networking. And I truly believe that you can measure your net worth by your network. And if you need to build your net worth, build your network first, because that's really what will help you. And social media is not networking. So I want you to know you could do it all look great on your thing, but if you're not out there pursuing your passion and the direction and industry you're looking for, you're not going to be as successful as you can. So when I think about networking, I think about the associations within my industry that helps us to drive strategy, compliance, complexity. One of those associations is how I met Peter, which is through ASIS. So I want to kind of on the panel here ask a few people, and I'll start with Brian since we met through one of these associations, is how important is networking and what are some of the things that you can share with the audience around that?
Sure. The first thing around networking is you've got to understand that you cannot do it alone, right? But that's probably ultimately the number one issue is that, if you're a team of one at that point, and you've seen when you collaborate and how much you can get done, you cannot do it alone. When we would post jobs, we would get 500, 700 job applications, right? Even if you think that you've got the best drafted application out there, you've got to get somebody to look at it, right? Because if it's not looked at, you're not getting looked at. And that's where I think a lot of the networking comes in, where you can call somebody and say, hey, do you know somebody at so-and-so, do you know somebody at Tesla? Can you do me a favor, call over there and ask them to pull out my resume and just look at it? And if you do that, you're now connected, and you're not doing it alone. Two is, where I've seen kind of failure in networking is there are no chips to it, right? If I help that person, I'll put this chip in my pocket, and I'll do that chip, and then maybe they'll collect that chip. It's an unselfish adventure. Right? You cannot be selfish around this, because the second you start saying, well, if I help that person, this person helps me, and I did, and I'm going to owe that person there, you're losing the battle, because they're going to see right through that. So make it unselfish. You have something to offer. You have connections. Make connections so you can have more to offer. But you have to be able to offer something. And don't be afraid to ask, but don't make it a selfish ask, like, oh, and I'll give you this later, right? That's not what this is about. This is about honesty. It's about connections, about people building. You know, and when you do that, you build your brand in a very complete way.
So what, may I ask the associations, because you represent a couple that even to this audience could be applicable as student members. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, so one, I just want to first notice something that happened when you were in the back and you were forced to come forward. I hated networking, and to this day, it's not my comfort zone. Right? If there was a practice going on, or was a party or an event, I would be in the corner with a drink, right, with a close friend. And that was my comfort zone. And so, you know, you have to force yourself out of that, the same way you were forced to come forward. Start making that a little bit of a practice. And you'll find comfort in there at some point. Yes, it'll be uncomfortable as you move forward. But forcing yourselves into associations, and we'll talk a little bit later about networking and why. But when you go to an association, on a trade or something that you're interested in, you're automatically now connecting with people in a direction that you want to go. Or they have an interest or a conversation that maybe will be helpful for you personally. That's not selfishness, right? That's smart. And so engaging with trade organizations, engaging with groups of people that are in your interest wheelhouse is smart networking.
And two of those organizations I wanted you to mention.
So ASIS International, it's a security security trade organization, so all security professionals. I've sat on the board of directors, do a lot of volunteer work. The Global Security Risk Management Alliance is another one. A couple of us founded to pull people together to talk more about specific content. I belong to ISC Squared and ISACA and ACFE, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners.
And those
ATAP.
are all IT-oriented associations?
Some IT, some threat professionals, some risk management. But the point is, it's where I want to be. It's where my profession is going. And so it's an effort to outreach, to put myself in a place to interact with the right people.
Great. Hey, Nora, what type of association work, or what would you say as a recruiter are you looking for on resumes?
So I think that is important, and going back to networking also, is not only important to make that connection on LinkedIn, but follow up. So it's important that you make that connection and make it personal. So you don't have to, let's say, email that person every week, every month, but see what that company that you're interested in participates. What, just to give you an example, I recruit mostly for recent grads, so I partake on your schools and your associations and your conversations, because I need to be able to relate to what you do, right? So if I'm gonna recruit for recent grads, I have to understand where your mind is, where your mindset, and you learn a lot. So I think it's important that not only take it as you have 100 connections, but are these worth it? Right? It could be 100, but these are people that you have a personal connection with and that you're going to be able to learn from. But for example, for the positions that I recruit from, I'm not an engineer, but I belong to associations that are engineer-based or sales or marketing, so that I'm able to relate to those candidates.
Yeah, and that's a great point, is that association work isn't also a place to meet other people, but it's also to further the depth of your knowledge base within that, practitioner space that you're looking at. Thank you. Nick, how about yourself? What would you say is some of your strengths of networking, or some of the things that you've done that has helped you in your career?
Yeah, I think, first of all, generally speaking, I can't overstate how important networking is as you start and build your careers, right? As an example, I can't think of a potential candidate that I interviewed or a job that I eventually got myself where I didn't have some connection with that person, with either the hiring manager or myself as a hiring manager, right? And it's the first place I go when I've got resumes put in front of me. I go look at the LinkedIn profile. But in terms of you know, the overall value of it, you know, you're probably not going to land a job without having even a loose connection. You know, hey, take a look at my resume. And then, you know, another thing that I think has served me well is to build on what Brian said, is to network unselfishly. And what I mean by that is it's easy to hide behind an email or send an email or read an email, right? If somebody calls me, I always respond in kind or more so than how I was responded to. If I get an email, right, I certainly at least email. If I call 100% of the people that call me, I call them back. If they were former employees, right, because it's a reflection of who I am, and I do it quickly, right? And those people that don't do that to me, I put them in the back shelf, right? Because I know the people that get things done, that do things that I want to be connected to, are proactive and or at least respond, right? Because we live in an age where an email can be sent off into the ether, and you know, if you're a candidate, you know, and you don't get a call back, you're like, oh, I don't want to go work for that company, right? It all builds, you know, on top of each other. So I think doing it unselfishly, and just kind of on a personal note, I thoroughly enjoy learning about, you know, everyone that I talk to, what they're doing. You know, you just constantly learn different things and gain different perspectives, and you probably give people those perspectives. So, you know, it is kind of, sometimes you want to sit in the back of the room and have a drink with a buddy, and that's okay. But you know, I would say do it unselfishly and do it very frequently.
Thank you. Deborah, what ways in which have you used and leveraged networking?
Well, I was just thinking about that, and right now in my life, I can think of 4 specific networking things that are happening at this very moment. So one of them is that actually someone in the room is here as a result of us networking at the gym. Okay, so you can network anywhere. Another situation is that I'm on this panel because I happen to speak to Peter on the bus. So you can be networking on the bus. Networking can happen everywhere. So I also advocate, when you are looking for a job, to try to reach out to somebody at the company who works there that you can speak to. So right now I'm hiring for a career specialist on my team, and several people have reached out to me to talk to me, to email me, to get a little bit of advice about the application process, what does the job entail. So those people who have contacted me are going to have a leg up because they know a little bit more about the position. And the 4th example is that a colleague of mine is trying to get a job at MIT. And I used to work at MIT, so I'm connecting him to somebody that I know at MIT. So those 4 things are happening just within the last week or so. Just 4 examples, and the networking opportunities are just endless.
And it is very bi-directional too. It's purely an investment. You know, they talk about the love bucket or your emotional bank account. It's no different when you're dealing with networking, and to be able to support others that you know, or to receive that support back. It's a very beneficial thing. And Matt, please share with us, because even your position you, I think, received through networking, right?
So I was an outsider in my industry. Robotics is a really small community. Most of them come from the same schools. I had to kind of build my network from the ground up to actually get into my chosen profession. And a lot of what these guys are saying in terms of being unselfish and everything definitely applies. I just had one the other day where somebody did me a favor when I was working for an early stage startup, and then he called me back and said, hey, I'm trying to get a job at this one company. Do you know anyone there? I knew like the CTO and just kind of passed him along. And so paying it forward, you never know. Just by talking to some random person at one of these events that has similar interests to you, maybe down the road they get you a job, maybe down the road they just give you a tip that leads you to discovering your like dream company or the perfect culture fit for you at some place that you wouldn't know of if you were operating a vacuum. So absolutely very important.
Awesome. You know, a big part of networking, and I think, and we've talked about it, is really identifying who is going to help you become the future you. And that never stops. This is a lifelong of learning when you're engaged at this level. And so one of the conversations that I had with Brian was about sharing with this room what mentoring looks like. Not just, oh, go get a mentor, but what does that mean? And Brian had said mentoring is one of the most rewarding parts of your career, both being receiving mentoring yourself and being a mentor. But you pointed out something really important, and that's there's a life cycle to everything. And so can you share with us some of your success on setting up a right type of mentoring relationship?
Sure, sure. So how many people have mentors today? Awesome. It's a lot. I still have a mentor, right? I mean, it's absolutely necessary in where you're going in life. And, you know, one of the things that that I think you have got to answer first for yourselves is, you know, where you're going and why do you need a mentor? And if you're just exploring, so right now I'm trying to explore where do I want to land next, right? I have a direction. And my direction is I'm exploring, right? So I got to find somebody that has explored in the past or that has done this in the past. And I've found one or two people that are now I'm talking with, say, hey, what'd you go through? What were the important parts that that resonated with you as you were looking for your next job, and what was necessary for you to make a decision? And so, you know, if you don't have a mentor, or even if you do have a mentor, and you got to find another one or want one, there are a couple things I think you need. One, you need a direction, right? What do you want out of it? Because you can't ask me for that. You need to know what you want to get out of it. I'll help, and I'll provide some subject matter expertise and some experiences. But first, you've got to find a mentor that's going to help you get down that path of what is it that you want, where do you want to go. It doesn't have to be 10 years from now. It could be 6 months, it could be 4 or 5 years. What do you want to accomplish? There's got to be a start date and an end date. Right, so if you would approach me and say, hey, Brian, I've looked at your LinkedIn profile. This is where I'm thinking right now. I've seen you have these experiences. I'd love to be able to talk with you for a half hour once a month for 4 months. This is what I'd like to accomplish. Meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3, meeting 4, and I would get a lot out of this. Do you have time for that? And if not, go find somebody else. But if you approach somebody like that, it's not open-ended. I know what you're looking for. I may be able to put some brain trust to that and start thinking about it beforehand. But if you come at me and say, look, I'm not really sure, you've got title, you've been in the C-suite, you know what, I don't want to spend my time and my resources, which is my time, on somebody like that, because it's a lack of direction. So understand your direction, have a strategy, right? Go find a mentor. There's plenty out there. Approach them with a plan. And have an end date, a start and an end date. That's really critical. That is not threatening at all. I'll tell you if I've got too many mentors, right? I can't do it. I may find somebody for you. But if you come at me with that, I will 100% respond.
And that's a good point, too, is you don't have to have just one mentor. I have a handful of mentors for different areas of expertise because I know what I'm looking for from each of those specific relationships. But I've never written a plan on that, so I appreciate you sharing that because I think I would think a little bit more about what appropriate questions to ask that'll help me drive more of the value. So,
it's okay not to know where you're going. I don't know where I'm going, right? I've had a whole full career. I was just left a corporate job for 15 years. I think it's fantastic, but to have people to talk with and say, hey, show me this. Let me explore this with you. Let me explore that. Where have you been? What's interesting about that? I can't figure that out on my own, right? But I've had a whole career of networking with my prior company to reach out to the people and get them. But I have a strategy, right? And so you need one. Even if you don't know where you're going, there's a strategy around that, right? Explore. I'm thinking these 5 industries. I'm thinking 50 industries. I don't know, right? There's people that have been in your shoes before. Or you're thinking about an industry, try somebody like that. Find the right level of person, right? If you go too high, there may be way too much over your head conceptually. You know, find somebody where you want to get to 5, 6 years, 10 years, maybe 5 years. But if you immediately go and say, I want to talk to the CEO, it's not realistic, right? And there will be a disconnect too on what I can help you with and where I'm at versus, if you would approach me and I say, but I've got a great manager who has, lived a long life and has a tremendous amount of experience that's more in your wheelhouse. So, when you find that too, find the right level because that's important.
Nice. Nora, have you hired or not hired based on people talking about their mentor in the interview process or on paper? Have you validated someone based on their mentor?
Yeah, I think that on a personal level, I will have to say that I give a lot of credit to my mentors where I am in my career, right? And it doesn't have to be, your mentor doesn't have to be in your industry. Sometimes you need somebody to bounce ideas. You need somebody with working experience. Just to give you an example, I'm mentoring right now an engineer. Nothing related when it comes to engineering, because I know that he has technical mentors for that, but I'm mentoring him in how to interview, how to approach your networking. So I think that you could have different mentors. It could be your boss. Mentors actually will do also a lot of the networking for you. Because I had students that are being mentored by a manager, and that mentor is going to go to bat for you, right? These are the mentors that are going to see a job posting, and they're going to send it to you, and they're going to send your resume to that recruiter. So I think it's important to build that network also with your mentor, because there is nobody else aside from your family that is going to believe in you the same way that your mentor believes in you.
Absolutely. And there's something about asking someone to mentor you. It's an onus. It's like, will you be my mom or will you be my dad? There's just something about it that this person, you know, you truly do, in accepting that mentorship or role, you do own that relationship and their personal growth.
As long as it's an end date. 'Cause I don't
That's
wanna
an
pay for
end
tuition.
date, right? He doesn't want to pay for tuition. He doesn't want to raise them all the way. But Nick, I would love to hear, I know you've mentored a lot of people in your career. I'd love to hear a couple things around mentoring that you think has been most successful with some of the folks you've worked with.
I think one of the things that I think is valuable is to look for mentors maybe outside of the discipline that you're taking as a path, right? To kind of maybe build on what Brian was saying. So I enjoy, as a person who's got a business experience, and I do have a technical background going way too far back in my career than I like to think about. But I like to provide different kinds of perspectives, right? So when I really enjoy mentoring folks that come out of the engineering part of the business from a technology perspective that want to gain perspective, or you know, purely network and meet new people, but understand how I look at the business from a business perspective and a sales perspective. And you know, we talk about margins and you know what the business needs to look like and certain metrics. So and I think you know, similarly, I've got I call them my board of directors. I've got some folks that I consider my mentors that are outside of my area of expertise, right? So I've got product leaders and engineering leaders, and it's very interesting to get their perspective, you know, as to how they look at the business. So I think one of the things is that that cross-pollination when you look to gain some mentors, and then you know, something that might get overlooked, you know, is not only should you kind of have a plan or some direction, and it might sound a little bit funny, it's something that I even do actively, it's kind of think about or practice a networking conversation, right? Because you want to approach someone not just with some ideas, but especially if you don't know them, you kind of have to get them to open up to you, right? So you maybe do a little bit of research on them, look at their LinkedIn profile, what is their background, where are they interested, where they go to school, right? And kind of practice that conversation. And I think that from my perspective, I appreciate that a lot, and I think it kind of opens up a conversation.
Wonderful, thank you. And then from Deborah, with mentorship, it's a little bit different, you know, in the university space than in corporate America. Can you kind of share some of the things that you look at mentoring in that capacity?
Yes, sure. So I want to share 3 things about mentoring. And one thing is that studies have shown that students or people in general who have mentors are actually ultimately more successful in their careers. So that's another incentive for all of you to get a mentor. The second thing I want to say is in our office as career specialists, what we do is essentially we mentor students, right? Because the job search and the internship search can be grueling, and you know, you can get discouraged. So one of the things that we can do and that a mentor can do is they can boost you up and they can coach you and they can remind you of the good things that you have and the strengths that you have when you're feeling down and defeated, right? So that's one of the things that we do in our office, and mentors can do that for you as well. And the third thing I want to say is that if you don't have a mentor, I would highly recommend tapping into the UMass Boston Alumni Network. And you can do that through LinkedIn. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you how to do that when I do my LinkedIn presentation. Because we have a really strong alumni network, and most of our alums want to give back to current students. So if you don't have a mentor, I would highly recommend tapping into the UMass Boston Alumni Network. Thank you.
Does anyone know any of the famous alumni here from the campus? Anyone? I saw that our chief of staff at the White House is a former alum here. So there's some really interesting folks for you to tap into in your own alumni in my research. Matt, how about yourself with mentoring? You've had a lot of mentoring. Obviously, it's a very strong technical aspect of what you're looking at. Can you speak to mentoring in that capacity?
Sure. So the most important thing at your stage of your career is to know yourself. So it's not, like the other panelists were mentioning, you're not going to, you might not have clear direction per se. I have an engineering background, so when I was your age, I had a very different idea of where my career was going, but I had a lot of mentors who would like sit down and talk with me, and I would tell them about the things that I wanted to do, and they would be like, it's not really engineering per se. Maybe you need to start like transitioning out of this. And, you know, I was 22. I was smarter than everyone else, obviously. It's taken a different direction since then, and now I'm doing what I love to do. So if you can go to these people and say, this is what I think I want to do, but you can explain to them clearly like where your strengths are, what you enjoy doing. We've been there before. We can kind of lead you in the right direction.
And I'm going to put you on the spot again here, Matt. In our conversations and preparing for the panel, one of the things that Matt had shared is the job market is a game, and you need to know how to play the game and how to lose, which was such a big, that's it right there. Rejection is part of that process, and most of all, social capital is where you get ahead. So when I think about social capital, that's your network. You know, and so Matt, share a little bit about that, because you were really adamant of keeping people in a realistic space, right? You didn't want me to come up here and cheer you all up and rah rah. He wanted you to know what reality is so you could prepare for that.
So similar thing, when I was graduating college, I thought there was this process for how you get your jobs, which is, you know, you fill out your resume real nice, you submit it to a bunch of people, maybe go to a job fair or two, and then a couple interviews later, you're good to go, and that's the start of your career. And that's just not the reality of the market today. You're probably going to apply to dozens, maybe 100+ jobs before you finally get that final offer. That's just how the world works right now. I'm not saying it's fair per se, but don't feel bad about it when that starts to happen to you. And as you're going through that process, don't just remain static. It's constantly adapting what's going. You know, you'll find things that work, you'll find things that don't work. You need to tailor applications to specific job roles and to different career paths. Don't just have one resume that exists in a vacuum. You yourself don't exist in a vacuum. You're constantly learning, you're constantly growing. So do that with all of your background information as well. And just be able to communicate. I think the important thing for me is to be able to communicate your story, really. You're young, you're inexperienced, but to be able to say, I've been exposed to certain things. These are the things I'm interested in. This is why I want to this is why I want to work for this company. This is why I want to talk to you. And if you can communicate that, I think that'll go a long way.
So I'm going to kind of change on the same lines, but within the same question, the same framework, when we were sitting down and speaking, Deborah, which I love her. This was from last night on her LinkedIn. Look at this. I guess she loves her job, huh? But she made some really powerful statements about adding on to what Matt said about giving up too soon. And then if we even add in what Nora said last night at the table was so often we pigeonhole or put ourselves into a box, right? I'm an engineering guy, can only do engineering. Well, there's tons of opportunities for guys with engineering that is a sales guy. Maybe you know engineering, but your personality is sales, right? So let's talk a little bit, if I may, about not giving up on that search and how to pick yourself up and keep going when you think that this is what you want and you're not getting it.
Well, thank you, Holly, for inviting me to speak about this, because this is where I get on my soapbox. When I meet with students and I write articles on LinkedIn about persevering in the job market, The key word is perseverance, and it really dismays me when I see students giving up way too quickly. And reasons that they give up is that, maybe a relative will say to them, oh, why did you major in that? Don't you know there are no jobs in that? Why don't you just stay where you are? Or, they'll hear these myths about the job market, and they'll give up. And my goal is to really push students and new graduates to go for your goal as much as possible. Give it every shot, knowing that it may take you 3 to 6 months to get that job, and it will be a challenging process that you go through. You will go on many interviews, and maybe you'll even make it to the final round. And then sometimes you won't get that job. It's happened to me. It's happened to me, and when I do this in workshops, I'll tell my students, I applied to UMass Boston probably 7 times before I got in here, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I interviewed here several times before I got a job, and then I applied for the job I had before this, and I got it. So what was the reason behind that? The reason behind that is maybe I wasn't the best fit for those previous jobs, right? But then I was the best fit for the job I got last time. So my message is that when you're in the job search or the internship search and you go on these interviews and you don't quite make it, it's not because you're not qualified, right? I always emphasize that. It's not necessarily because you're not qualified. It could be that you're just not the right match at that time. So keep persevering until you are the right match.
So, Nick, you had mentioned earlier that you would never have considered a role that led you to your success today. And a friend through your network said, oh, you should work at Microsoft. And you're like, oh, they'd never consider me. So talk a little bit about how that doubt, was changed by your personal network.
Well, I think it also dovetails into perseverance. I had a conversation quite some time ago. It was 1994. I remember the conversation. Mike Kelly, who is still works and is a former colleague of mine at Microsoft that I still network with quite a bit, said, you should come work at Microsoft. And I had a liberal arts background. I'm like, they're not going to hire me. They're not going to look at me. And I didn't even think about it. But I kept in contact with him. And a number of years later, about 3 years later, I guess, he said, he came back and said, have you considered Microsoft? I was a little bit more mature and I guess maybe a little bit more ready. And I was living in Connecticut and I interviewed for a job at Microsoft that I thought I was a perfect fit for, right? My resume was tailored, and I remember the guy who interviewed me, his name was Keith, and he didn't hire me, and I was crushed. And I'm like, see, I knew they wouldn't hire me, right? And about 6 months later, that was in Connecticut, someone from the Boston office, actually they were in Waltham, office of Microsoft, said, do you want to come back in for an interview? And I was like, once bitten, I'm like, you know what, but I did, and I gave it 100%. And outside of costing me some shares in '94, when I wish I would have started, I got a job at Microsoft. And I spent 11 years there, and it was a very formative, I consider it where I grew up in technology, right? That's where I learned how to do my job. I learned how to be a manager. I learned how to lead, which is probably a better way to put being a manager. And if it wasn't due to perseverance and being said no, not thinking I could do it, then being said no to, and I'm like, I knew I wasn't the right person for that job. And then eventually, landing a job at Microsoft, which was probably one of the most rewarding, fun parts of my career. That perseverance, without it, I wouldn't have made it. So obviously it's an example of if someone's, if you don't get a job or you get told no or you don't think you're capable of it, well, it turns out I was capable, and it turns out I needed to just be a little bit persistent, and I ended up probably getting, the most rewarding job I ever had in my career, or opportunity.
Yeah, perseverance, definitely. And we all are filled with self-doubt, and so listen to those voices, and that's what a mentor's for, is to set yourself straight. I can't tell you how scared I was to come up and visit with you all today and make sure that this looked right. And it was a mentor who said to me, well, you did this, this, and this, right? Yeah? Well, you're prepared. Don't worry about it. And quite often we need that voice. So Nora, we're going to jump here to what I have in a statement that you had said, that your passion drives you for the fear of missing that next star to the competition. So as a recruiter, and to compete in this world, you got to make sure you don't box yourself in. You need to make sure you embrace the global and mobile workforce. You're sharing that that's one thing with young people today and early career people is they're not as open to this global mobile place that we are. Can you share a little bit about how important that is and to allow people to understand what that direction is?
Guys, and this is, I think, is important, especially for you for entry-level positions. The more flexible and mobile that you are, the easier that it is for a company to place you, right? And believe me, 10 years from now, when you see yourself back sitting at this room, you're gonna say, I did not think that I was gonna end up at this job. Because you have to allow yourself the opportunity to try new things. And just to touch on what the panel was saying when it comes to resumes, and I wanna give you the perspective, my perspective as a recruiter. I go through at least 3,000 resumes per month. So when we tell you not to take it personal, do not take it personal, right? And that's why it's important for you to understand the jobs that you're applying for. Recruiters have a really short attention, right? You need to capture our attention in the first 30 seconds that I'm reviewing your resume. So it's important that you understand that your resume is a living, breathing document. So you need to make sure that you tailor that resume to what we are looking for. Another thing that is important for you guys to understand is that, just to give you an example, JCI is a global company. We are in 150 countries. We have locations all over the US. If you tell me, Nora, I'm only interested in working in Boston, you're only giving yourself a little bit of room on the positions that I can place you, right? Another example, if you're an engineer and let's say you have a civil engineering background, right? I might not have a position there, but if you're open to the possibility of doing technical sales, for example, or being an account management, that is something that I can help you with. So I think that is important also, especially for a society that is highly connected and virtual. Make sure that you don't lose the opportunity to meet the leaders of the companies when they come to campus, because it makes that such a personal, powerful, they're gonna remember you. You know, being here today, grab the business card, make a note. I think Peter mentioned that yesterday, and it's such a powerful because you make it personal. Be passionate. Be passionate because every single meeting that you have, meet and greet, is an interview. Mm-hmm. You know, these leaders are gonna remember you that you were passionate about being here, you were passionate about LinkedIn, you were passionate about learning, because sometimes you, as a recent grad, you might not have that experience, but the ability to learn, the natural need to learn, I think is gonna drive your career a lot.
Thank you for that. We're just a little bit short on time, so is there anything that anyone on the panel wants to add to that before the next question? I didn't want to. Okay. So last part about our conversation and that we had was really with Nick and I, and it's to talk about the brand that Nora just brought up. And Nick had said, your brand is your social media fingerprint. And at his organization, one of the largest global companies, everyone is considered part of the marketing department. And be careful what you post. This whole event today came upon when Peter and I were having a conversation, and his disdain, like he couldn't believe what's going on with these students in his Boston accent, right? Because what were they
That's
thinking?
not a Boston
putting
accent,
that on
by the way.
Facebook, right? And so it really made me think this is an important part of bringing out, and something that Nick brought out from actual Dell themselves. And I want to share, this is from corporate America, folks, and Nick can go into this, is employers feeling on social media. And he sent this slide, so I highlighted it, but one of the things that stated from his organization, if you're not using LinkedIn to grow your relationships and connect with customers, the competition is. And then you could read this and I'll send it out later, but the bottom part right here is posting on social media benefits you and it benefits Dell. Social media is no longer the responsibility of one person or one department. And since clients, customers, and candidates have the ability to be investigators and reporters, every single one of us needs to be in marketing, servicing, and selling on LinkedIn. That's huge. How big is Dell in the marketplace, Dell EMC? What's your share of all of the?
Well, we're a
stores?
private company now, so I can't release any
Okay.
numbers. When Dell bought EMC, we're 140,000 employees.
Wow.
And arguably from a hardware perspective, the largest tech manufacturer
And you just
in the
dominate.
globe. Yeah.
And so this organization has put it in the place of the field to really be that social media fingerprint. So think about that. Think about your resume you're sending to someone, and it automatically pops up the picture from your Gmail account. I've received some resumes from proteges that I'm mentoring, and when I see that, I'm like, who the heck is this kid? And because it's not somebody I recognize. So be mindful of that digital fingerprint. And Nick, you also shared this slide right here, which is really about the brand part of it. And to stay on top of mind, it's all about building trust and credibility. It's not just about you interviewing, it's how the world perceives you and your company's brand. They're linked together, those two things.
Yeah, and I think just to point out what's on this slide and the previous slide is when Holly asked me if I'd come down here today, it's 15 minutes from my house for one. But the important part about this is I didn't prepare the previous slide or this content for today's discussion, right? So how important is this topic inside of top companies? And I can say Microsoft looks at it the same way. These slides are part of internal training that go out to our executives and that they're expected to share, and that we're expected to share with the people that work for us on how to use social networking. So our internal human resources department puts together slides and programs and collateral on how they expect us to use social media, right? So they actually have programs around it. So if you want to think about how valuable is it, right? Some of the top tech companies in the world build programs around how to use social media.
And Recipan, I love kind of a little bit of a statement on brand and your brand ambition, Brian. You've been huge with that.
So branding's interesting, and I hear like resumes, a lot of talk about resumes. It reminds me a little bit, when you see somebody and you're saying, wow, that person's going to go somewhere, it's usually not built on your understanding of their past, but their passion moving forward. And so make sure you capture that.
How do you do that
in your
resume?
brand?
How do you capture that? How do you express that?
Your resumes have to be particular to what you're going for, right? If you have a general resume, it will read that way, and there's no doubt about it. Doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean it's not well written. Doesn't mean redlined and sent back. But is it reading your passion too in that first couple sentences to say, I want to be here, I'm passionate about this, and this is why don't turn me down, right? Does it read that way? If it doesn't, it should. For that company, and the next company should be very different too. So why do you want to be there, and why are you passionate about that? Your general statement of, hey, this is who I am, this is what I've done in the past, right? It's that comment when you look at somebody and you're like, wow, that person's going somewhere. It's not because you read their resume and you're like, wow, that's great. Yeah, maybe, but most of it's because you found passion in that person. They know what they want. They've got a plan. They're headed there, and when you kind of see that in their being, and I think that's part of your brand. You've got to capture that, including LinkedIn, right? I mean, I've probably changed mine since I've been left my company probably 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5, 6 times, and that's not because I found other jobs, because I haven't. It's because I'm engaged with practice and I'm doing this and I'm publishing something, right? But I'm also trying to find new passions of, all right, well, I just redirected, so my passion's here now. And so make sure you pay attention to that too, because I think that's part of your brand is your passion.
Deborah, what could you share about brand ambition to the students today?
Well, when I do my LinkedIn presentation, I do have a slide devoted to that because I think this concept of personal branding is hard for students to grasp. So I do have a specific slide on that, and you'll see that it's sort of the intersection between how you perceive yourself and how the world perceives you. And whenever I do workshops about this, I always tell students that before it were only celebrities and politicians who had to be concerned about their personal brands. But now everybody has to be concerned about their personal brand because everybody's a public figure, so to speak, on the internet. So it's really an important concept, and I will delve more into that when I talk about how you can convey your personal brand on LinkedIn.
Matt, do you have, I know you had said a lot about the resume and tweaking it with buzzwords and around your brand. Can you share a little bit?
When you are applying to different roles, you need to know the market in terms of what that specific company needs. You also need to know where the market is heading to show that you're kind of involved with it. To me, the most important thing on your resume is to tell your story, and it should be easy for us. The easiest thing for each one of us to do is to talk about ourselves. So just summarize that and let people know. You have to package it down to a really condensed document, but this is who I am, this is what I want to do, this is why. And if you can show that you are engaged, that you do know what's going on in the world, and that this is why you want to be a part of that, it'll show.
Thank you.
Just quick comment
Sure,
too.
absolutely.
Have you had somebody look at your LinkedIn account and ask them what your brand is without telling them what you're going for? Try that. I just did it this week to somebody I'm mentoring, and I asked them, hey, do me a favor. Look, I just edited my LinkedIn account. Look at it, and I want your honest opinion. What are you getting out of this? She has some very interesting comments that I did not catch at all, and so. Grab somebody to take a look at it for you. I think, and if you haven't done that, it's the same thing as a resume, right? If you haven't passed your resume on to somebody else to say, hey, can you look at this? Not for red lines, right? For what are you communicating and who you are.
I have one thing to say also, guys. If you see that you're applying through LinkedIn or to the career portals for these companies and you're not getting any hits, stop, reassess. Have one of your mentors or the career services review your resume, review your LinkedIn profile, check your connections, because sometimes it's something that you're missing. It's not something that they have against you. It's something that you might be missing when it comes to your brand. So just remember, when it comes to a personal brand, is try to impress yourself, right? You have to reassess what you're doing and make sure that is in part of what you're presenting to the world.
Thank you. I'm going to close that now for the panel, but the panel will be joining us in the breakout session, so you'll actually have mentors around you to look at this and to carry through the conversation. I really wanted to share the last thing about brand and about networking and how this all comes together in kind of a close. For myself, I have a brand ambition. My name's Holly Hunt, but you'll quite often see me sign my name HH. And to me, unless you know it, that HH actually means happy hunting. And it's in my pure goal to really reach out and to be that space for everyone to find that next thing to help facilitate and enable your success. Selfishly, in business development, it allows me to be in a room and help solve problems and to help find that happy medium. Any Game of Thrones fans here in the room? Anybody watch Game of Thrones? One or two, so they'll get this. It's a battle out there, and the Seven Kingdoms are fighting for it, and I really wonder where we all position ourselves. So for those who know Game of Thrones, this is who I see myself as. And in my role, not all heroes hold weapons, and just some hold the door. So if I can help hold a door or open a door for you and be that mentor and that support, please let me know.
I loved hearing about your brand, the HH, and so I'll share mine, okay? So student affairs is my job. J-O-B, joy of being. Students, you are my joy of being, and I love every day that I come to work and get to be with you. And I think that permeates within the Division of Student Affairs, and that our vision is to make sure that we do the best possible job for student care, connection, and success. Connection being what we're talking about here, and connection happens in so many ways. And so we have this recognition thing that we do when people do something exemplary related to care, connection, and success. And Peter already got his button for connection, and so, but I'll just give you applause for putting this together and helping to make connections for students. And the other person who didn't get much recognition for this event, I want to pull up here, and that is Michael Metzger, who's the Special Assistant to the Vice Chancellor, and I want to present him with his connection button for helping to put this event together. So come on up, Michael. All right. So look around. You might see some of those buttons. Care, connection, and success means somebody was doing something really important for you. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're gonna take just a quick 10-minute break. We're gonna come back down. After you do whatever you need to do, grab a box lunch, sit at a table, and then Deborah's gonna go. Actually, we're gonna have Nora come first. And Nora, part of our early careers individual, she has brought with us what it looks like in the internships and new jobs with Johnson Controls. As she shared, we operate in 150 countries. We're over a $300 billion company with 114,000 employees worldwide. So we have a lot on the go, and we're looking for individuals with passion and drive that we've talked about today. So she's going to go through and talk about what that looks like in an organization like ours, so you can see what type of internships and roles that we're hiring. And then we're going to have Deborah go through and do the LinkedIn. So just take a few moments, and then we'll all come right back together.